If you Google landscape photography, you get these types of images. Now, there might be some interesting photographs here, and certainly some of them may display a lot of technical skill, but the overall impression is somewhat garish, I would say. Oversaturated, over-contrasty, over-sharpened, chocolate box type of imagery with strong emphasis on the colours orange and pinks. And I don't think there's a lot of individuality either. A lot of these photographs look as if they could have been done by the same photographer. Everyone seems to be looking for the same type of shot, the same type of saccharine postcard view, and they seem to be using the same presets in Lightroom and Photoshop. There's a guy on YouTube, an English landscape photographer, who's very popular. He's got thousands of subscribers, and there's no question that he's very talented, if you like that type of work. And a few months ago, he was touring around the Highlands and Islands of Scotland in a camper van, and he came onto the Isle of Skye, and he got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and climbed up this particular mountain in order to get the sunrise. And so he was climbing up there in the middle of the night, and it was cold and rainy. And when he arrived up there was a whole photographic club that had arrived before him. And I don't know what he actually thought about that, but he just kind of scrambled down the mountain again and found a new place, took his shot, and looked very pleased with himself. But I couldn't help thinking about this, because if that had happened to me, if I was in this remote area of the country and I dragged myself up a mountain at 5:30 in the morning, only to discover that a dozen other people had got there before me and had exactly the same idea, that would have put me in a kind of existential crisis. This is why this type of epic landscape photography, as its proponents often refer to it, I find so problematic. It is what Raymond Moore called chasing postcard views, and is, as a genre, traditional, conservative, conventional, commercial, derivative, and very popular. There's no question about that. I find these kind of images empty, devoid of anything other than the most superficial prettiness. They are generic landscapes almost, that, largely because of their over-processed look, seem to be related to video games or the landscapes in Lord of the Rings. In fact, it's very common to see potentially very good photographs ruined by bad processing. It does make me wonder if our collective vision has become degraded, Disneyfied, or infantilized by decades of Hollywood sentimentalism and the slick PR effects of global marketing. However, never fear, there is an alternative, a way of looking at landscape, at the world around us, in a deeper, more thoughtful way. And it's not simply a question of black and white over colour. Okay, my own preference, I suppose, is for black and white photographs, but it's not really about that at all. It's more about what the photograph reveals about the world and about ourselves. Quiet landscape, documentary landscape, intimate landscape, lyrical landscape. I'm not sure how one would define these images, but they are marked by an absolute presence. There is a force of individual character, of place in these images, a strength of individuality brought out and made apparent by the artist's eye for form, light, composition, juxtaposition, scale, texture, contrast, balance, resemblance, and otherness of places and sites that we see around us every day. Some photographers feel they have to travel to exotic locations or literally hang from a helicopter to take extraordinary photographs. The current popularity of drones seems to point towards a desperately unceasing search for the novel, the next hit of visual jiggery-pokery. But what is novel today quickly becomes old, and the drone highs become stale. The drugs don't work anymore, just as we now tire of HDR and spot colour fads in photography. These images take time to appreciate, perhaps. Many will regard them as simply boring or pretentious. If so, I would urge you to stick with it. Children prefer sweets and crisps, and we have to learn to appreciate caviar and camembert and a nice glass of Chablis. Our palate changes and develops as we grow older. As children, we learn to read and write, but we are not taught visual literacy. In fact, many of us remain visually illiterate all our lives, which is the reason why, even now, such historically important figures as Jackson Pollock or Picasso are largely dismissed by the public. Now, that's not the fault of the general public, of course. They don't have the benefit of a visual education. Artists and creatives do learn visual literacy, but even here it's largely a long autodidactic process, and victory can be hard won. It begins in college, but continues throughout one's life. In forthcoming videos, I will be looking at some of these photographers more closely and investigating what they were trying to do and what they achieved.